We have Anne Leclerc, Director of Treasury and Capital Markets of the Belgian Debt Agency, and Lucie Alfirman, Director General, Budget Financing and Risk Management, Ministry of Finance to the Republic of Indonesia. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Indonesia and Belgium might not at first glance have an awful lot in common. One is a northern European state famous for Hercule Poirot, Tintin, and home to the European Commission, and perhaps more importantly, excellent moules frites. The other, an Asia-Pacific nation, 11,500 kilometers away, made up of, I think, over 18,000 islands. I'm not
more or
counting,
less.
but and famous for its coffee, batiks, and of course, home to this year's IMF World Bank annual meeting in Bali in October. But of course, they do have one very important thing in common. They are among the still small group of pioneering sovereign green bond issuers, both having done their first green deals this year. So let's start with some background on our two issuers, just to give you some information on the background. For Belgium, its green bond, sold in February, was sized at 4.5 billion euros, after drawing a book of 12.7 billion euros, and had a new issue premium of 1.5 basis points, one of Belgium's tightest deals since 2008. Belgium's last major deal, a 5 billion 10-year in January, had a new issue premium of 2 basis points. So we could argue it was slightly tighter on that basis. Importantly, it had the explicit support of Prime Ministers Charles Michel and Finance Minister Johan van Overtveld. How's my accent? Is that all right?
Excellent.
Yeah. As well as the Environment Minister. And I understand structuring took 5 months. Anne, you said at the time that the book was very high quality and the pricing was sharp. The majority of investors could be qualified as green investors or having a connection with a green cause. This, I think in your words, was good diversification of your investor base compared with normal deals. We can talk a little bit more about your deal in a minute, Anne, but for Indonesia, your green bond was issued also in February 2018, a $1.25 billion 5-year debut green sukuk paired with a 10-year conventional sukuk, making the country the first green sovereign issuer in Asia. Some 8 billion was attracted across 2 tranches with a new issue premium of about 10 basis points on the green tranche, 5 basis points on the non-green tranche, according to one estimate. Roadshows began in late January, but the deal was slightly delayed until late Feb because of market volatility, I think. The bond was designed to support Indonesia's nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement, importantly, and this is to reduce GHG emissions by 29%. Compared with business as usual scenario by 2030. Indonesia is highly exposed to climate change as a nation of islands, of course. It's also the world's 5th biggest greenhouse gas emitter and a big user and exporter of coal. And I should add that since the sovereign deal, I think I'm right in saying, an Indonesian corporate, Star Energy, has issued a 580 million green project bond. So you've started something in Indonesia. So, ladies and gentlemen, having heard a little bit about the background of our two issues, let's start with some questions. And I'm going to start with the origins of both your deals. And Anne, let's begin with you. What was the political origin and purpose of setting up your green program?
Well, as you said, in fact, it was a statement of our Prime Minister in the summer, saying that part of the financing of the Belgian state would have been done through a green bond. So that was really the beginning. And I think the main reason for him was, on one side, political, and on the other side, also financial. Of course, political, it's important for a minister to make a political statement, and was really showing that there is a commitment of Belgium towards a transition towards a more environment-friendly economy. That was his big deal. It was big goal also. And on the other side also, he wanted to make a statement on the financial side. He, of course, we all understand that climate change is going to require very high investments, and the green bond market is still a very small market. and adding immediately a sovereign green bond of a size between 3 and 5 billion, because there was a size which we were thinking of at that time, gives immediately a very big amount for the amount of addition to the green bond market. We're talking about approximately 10% more just by doing one transaction. It immediately also adds liquidity towards a green bond market, because most of the green bond deals up till then, of course, taking a part of the French OAT, were smaller deals where the liquidity was not really guaranteed. And at the same time, also, the minister wanted to make a statement towards the Belgian green market. And the Belgian green market is very small still. Still needs to be developed. And he thought that doing green bond is really a good catalyst also, and would be incentivizing the Belgian green market, as well from the issuer side, so which means that we think that we're going to have some followers. We have been leading by example, and also from the asset manager side, in the sense that we have seen some funds starting to put a bigger accent on green investments, and I think that was the main aim of our Prime Minister there.
Has the deal met its objectives?
Well, as I said, the objectives are very different. It's, first of all, raising awareness. It's a very long-term objective, so it's difficult after 6 months to say that we have met the objectives. On the green, developing the Belgian green bond market, we know that there are some followers. We know that some of our issuers, especially on the regional side, but also on the sides of the communities, that they are in the starting blocks, wanting to do something, but as you know, structuring a green bond is quite a hard job, a cumbersome job. So you need some time to do that. So I suppose that if they are coming with an issue, it will be probably in the last quarter of this year, or maybe in the month of October. So that's one element. Also from the fund side point of view, we've seen that, for example, FEBELFIN, which is the organization of the Belgian financial sector, is starting to work on labeling of some of the financial products which can be called sustainable. They will be coming out with some guidelines in October, in November, and it will give some more guidelines also. It will give some more guidance, I would say, towards investors who are wanting to invest into sustainable products. And then the last objective, which we wanted to put, is giving some more liquidity to the green bond market. And there, really, we think that we tick the box. Adding 4.5 billion towards the green bond market is immediately putting some kind of big size and liquidity into the green bond market. So I would say yes, we have met the objectives. We're still looking to continue to meet the objectives in the years to come, I would say.
Thank you. Pat Lukey, can I call you Pat?
Yeah, of course.
How about you? What was the origin and purpose of Indonesia's green bond and Sukuk program?
Okay, thank you, Toby. Thank you for inviting me in this very prestigious forum, so we can share our insight, our thought about this green bond in particular. So the question is, Indonesia is very under the leadership of President Jokowi. We are very committed in supporting this climate change, and we are, I think, one of the early countries who ratified this Paris Agreement back in 2016. We have submitted our NDC, nationally determined contribution, for example. So that's kind of our commitment. On the other hand, of course, fiscally speaking, we still run deficit, so we need some financing to support our budget. And we've been a regular bond issuance in international market, but again, in 2017, again, continue in 2018, so we know that the global market is still facing this uncertainty, volatility, so we have to come up with more, innovative, creative financing. So that's why it brought us to how we design some new instrument here. So we came up with this green Sukuk bond. I think this is the first sovereign green Sukuk bond to be issued. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of, unusual combination, right, between sukuk printed in green format. But that's what we are thinking in the sense that we have this already captive market because this is sukuk, but on the other hand, we try to tap this new investor base. So try to expand this new investor base, try to attract this green investor in particular. So that's what we do. And of course, it's very challenging. We don't have, let's say, expertise on this. So that's why we also got some advice, some assistance from the expert. In this case, we're working together with our partner UNDP. So to work out on this, how to design this new instrument, what should we prepare, things like that. And along the way, also, because this is bond issuance, we work together with our GLM, joint lead managers, the bankers. So for example, we got some good assistance, also some help from HSBC to design this. Of course, we have to start with what's so-called the framework. So that's why we design, we develop, we formulate what's so-called green bond and green sukuk framework. And then the next step will be, it has to be endorsed. It has to be maybe reviewed by kind of, a credible, reputable institution. So that's why we went to Cicero, and then they review our framework, and we got this medium green shading from the Cicero. So that's kind of the process. It's a long journey, but I think we did that. And in February, we printed the first green sukuk bond.
Thank you. Thank you. Anne, you've been managing Belgium's debt issuance for a number of years now. The green bond is a new kind of instrument, which does not come from the classical treasurer's repertoire, shall we say. From your perspective, though, as a debt manager, is it a good funding instrument?
Well, to some extent, it's not really a new instrument because it's a green OLO, and an OLO is really our major standard financing instrument. And we wanted to do something which is appealing towards green investors. Of course, that's which are really the kind of investor base which we're gearing at. But at the same time, we also wanted to make sure that our regular investors would be interested in that product because. And so it adds immediately an OLO which has the same characteristics as the other OLOs, liquidity, size. We tap it on a regular basis, making sure that at the end it will be approximately 10 billion in size, which is a good size. But on the other side, it's true. It is a bit new in the sense that the underlying, or what is going to be financed by the proceeds of that bond, is of course green eligible expenditures, and to that extent, it is more appealing to green investors than it would be appealing to regular investors. So, I would a bit nuance the new kind of instrument.
And just you mentioned you want to tap it up to 10 billion. Did you say? And is that the normal size of a Belgian?
Yeah, well, if you look at the 15-year maturity bonds, those, well, when you start as a 15-year maturity, most of the bonds have a size of approximately 10 to 12 billion. Yep. And so the minimum global size of a bond of 15 years would be approximately 10 billion. So which means that we will have to tap it several
So the same
years.
liquidity virtues, if you like, as a conventional deal, basically. Yep.
Yes. That is absolutely what we would like to have. And also the fact that you make it appealing not only to green investors but also regular investors gives itself, adds liquidity to the bond itself. Because what we have seen is that the green investors, when they buy the bond, most of the time they hold it. And if you want to have a little bit of liquidity in the bond itself, you have to make sure that the bond is not only bought by the green investor, but also by the regular investors, which then add liquidity to the bond by buying it, selling it on a regular basis.
We'll get on to, we'll delve into the investor bases in a minute, and hopefully in a bit more detail. But just on the pricing and the costs. Have you done an assessment of the costs involved in issuing and maintaining the green bond, including the reporting? And how does that stack up?
Indeed. We did an assessment of the costs before we really started structuring of the bond. As this bond involves not only the Ministry of Finance, but also different other ministries, we had to go to the Council of Ministers. And you cannot go to the Council of Ministers without giving them an idea what the cost would be of that new instrument. So which means that we really had a good assessment of the external cost, of the cost which is immediately impacting the budget for this new bond. If you look at those external costs, which include a second opinion, which also include an auditor for the allocation. It also would include some consultancy for the reporting. We're talking about approximately 1/3 of a basis point over the life of the bond, so which is quite small. It's almost nothing, I would say. Now, besides the external cost, you also can speak about an internal cost. An internal cost is really the cost of structuring the bond itself. We've been working approximately 5 months on structuring the bond, and all in all, if you make a guesstimate of how many people have been working on this, I would say like 2 full-time equivalents during 5 months, which is not a small amount. And I'm talking only on the BDA point of view. Of course, there have been some work also from in the different other ministries, the Ministry of Environment, but also the Ministry of Mobility, for example. And I didn't look at those internal cost elements. But of course, it's difficult to say that this is a real cost. I would say it's more an additional cost. It's a sunk cost, and it's not something which you really can put into figures. So all in all, I would say if you look at the real cost, it's approximately 1/3 of a basis point. And now if you look at the funding advantages which we had, that's a very tricky question because you know, an OLO is an instrument which is priced off the Belgian curve, and the Belgian curve is a very liquid curve, so it's very transparent. You know when you start the OLO, when you start a 15-year maturity, you know more or less what the fair value is of that product. So the funding advantage would be coming from the new issue premium. And if your new issue premium is smaller than in other cases, then you can speak about a certain advantage. Now, if we're looking at the other 15-year maturities, which we did before, but there was already some years before, and markets are changing, then the new issue premium was 4 basis points. So now in this maturity, in this green OLO, our issue premium was 1.5 basis points. So you could say that you had a funding advantage of approximately 2.5 basis points, but as you rightly pointed, the 10-year maturity, which we did in January, had a new issue premium of 2 basis points. So all in all, we have had a slight advantage by doing this green bond, but I would not totally overestimate it, and I would not say 2.5 basis points, for example. So there is a slight advantage, and I think the advantage really comes from the fact that some investors who have already quite a heavy portfolio in Belgian bonds would not have bought the Belgian OLO if it would not have been labeled as being green. Yeah. And that probably has given the advantage of that small tightening of the sharp pricing of the bonds.
Okay, Pat Lukey, what about you? Do you expect to obtain a cost of funding advantage by doing green?
Okay, first in terms of cost, first that internally speaking, the process itself, that comparing with, let's say, regular bond issuance, this green bond issuance needs more time, more resources, you know, because for regular bond issuance, for example, that, okay, we just write prospectus, and if necessary, we do some roadshow, and then issue the bonds, right, and that's it. So for green bond issuance, even from preparation, so we have to, you know, identify the project, green projects, select the projects, and then, as I said, for example, it has to fit with this the framework, and then we have to do this roadshow. And then not only that, let's say after the issuance, we still have this obligation to write the report. So in terms of process, yes, it takes much longer time. It takes also more resources for sure. But in terms of pricing, the problem here is it's only one transaction so far. So, and then, as you mentioned, we did this roadshow, and then that's at the end of January, early February. And then when we were about to enter the market, and then all of a sudden, market became, turbulence at that time. So we had to wait, to be honest with you, we had to wait almost 3 weeks to find the right window to issue our bond at that time. So we don't expect that pricing at that time that it will, we will get, let's say, extra lower price because of this green. So our objective at that time is try to, again, expand to tap new investors. Yep. And then that's our main objective at that time. And then I think it went pretty well because the result was that we were able to tap this 29% of new investor, green investor of our, for this buyer of our, this green sukuk. So I think in terms of that objective, I think it went quite well. But going forward, yes, of course, we expect that with the more, better demand, better, let's say, people attention on this green initiative, that of course that we hope there's an incentive for us to issue this green bond with this lower price.
And there's also increasing evidence that a green deal performs better at times of market disruption and it doesn't gap out as much.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's true as well.
Yeah. But okay, just going on to I said we'd talk a little bit more in depth about the investor base. And I think you mentioned it earlier, Pak Luki, but did your inaugural issue attract new investors that would not buy or had not bought Indonesian sukuk before?
Yeah, as I said that if you look at our composition, the buyer for that issuance, that 33% went to, because this is sukuk, so 33% went to this Middle East and Malaysia bondholders, basically, the investors, those what so-called, we call it traditional Islamic investors. 1/3 went to European and US investors. The other 1/3 went to Asia, including Indonesia. Indonesia is 10% from the total. So that's kind of the composition. So because, again, it's not purely green, because some investors still see this sukuk part of this green sukuk. So that's why, as I said, 32% still went to traditional Islamic investor, basically. However, we are quite satisfied with this 29% investor, these new green investors. And as I said, that we hope that is the trend. Hopefully that in the coming years, we will continue to issue our bond in green format, that we could tap this even bigger new green investors.
Yeah. So it achieved genuine diversification?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Anne, on one of the points you emphasized at the time of the roadshow, when you did your deal, was your hope that the green OLO would stimulate the emergence of a larger Belgian green bond market with both issuers and investors becoming more active. There had only been, I think, 100 million euros of green bond issuance out of Belgium before that. What's been the take-up since?
Well, we have seen some corporate issuers in the market. So there is some corporate issuers in the market. Okay. We see the bank issuing also a green bond. We've seen also some funds being specific green bond funds or green funds being originated. And what we've seen also is that some banks and other fund asset managers did make up a specific green portfolio segment of segment in their portfolio. So that we have seen. So that is an achievement which is still very small. I admit that's true. But as I said, February is still a short time.
Yeah, and so that was one of the objectives, wasn't it? Or when you did the deal, was to put Belgium on the map of.
Well, the idea is really to put Belgium on the market to make sure that some of the Belgian investors would be more attracted by the green bonds. Yes.
Yeah. But I think I'm right in saying that Belgian investors bought less of your February deal than they usually would do on a normal OLO.
That's not fully true.
No?
If you look at last year's syndications, most of the syndications, most of the domestic takeoff in the syndications were around 5 to maximum 10%. And that has to do with the portfolio of most of the Belgian investors themselves. As you might have guessed, in the years 2008, 2010, up to 2010 and 2011, a lot of domestic investors bought Belgian bonds, and now gradually they are diversifying more into other countries, and the diversification has been fully done. So the only incentive for them really to buy Belgian bonds is redemptions, and as I said before, the greenness of the OLO was one of the incentives for them to buy the OLO rather than just to buy a regular one. They wouldn't have bought the regular one. They just bought the OLO because it was a green OLO. And on the roadshow, which we have done with some Belgian investors, it has been literally said that the greenness of the OLO was the incentive for them to buy the OLO.
Okay.
As the element of diversification was one of the main themes also of their portfolio management.
So, and based on your experience, would you encourage other governments to issue green bonds? And what would your advice be to them?
I think that it is, as I said, a very powerful communication tool. And if, as a government, you want to make a statement with regard to the green market, and also with regard to how you're doing it with regard to environmental changes, I think it's a very, very powerful statement. Now, this being said, when you're confronted with that, being in a DMO, it's not the easiest task. So you have to make sure, first of all, that you have the highest political support, because issuing a green bond means working together with different ministries. So you will have to have a lot of interministerial meetings. You need to have support to do that. That's one element which is very important. I think what is also very important is that you have to be aware that green investors are very sophisticated investors. So you need to be very precise and very accurate on the way of picking out your green eligible expenditures. You have to make sure that those eligible expenditures are really green. You get a lot of questions on that on the roadshow, so you have to be standing very, very strong into your shoes and very much appreciated there. That is certainly one of the elements which is important. And the third thing which I found very important is the KISS principle is a very important principle. Don't make it too complicated, make it simple. Don't choose too many different eligible expenditures. Choose big chunks so that in the future years, when you have to report on the impact of those green eligible expenditures, you make your life a little bit easier, and not only easier, but you make it also more transparent towards your investors. So don't complicate your life. Yeah. And this being said, I must say that, for example, for our bond, 85% of our bonds were railway expenditures. When we started to structure the bond, we were asking ourselves if that would have been something acceptable towards the green investors, and that was not a problem at all, on the contrary.
How about you, Pak-Lucky? Did you enjoy the experience, and would you recommend it to others, or was it
again
much work?
For Indonesia, this is kind of long, not that easy journey. That maybe what we can share with, let's say, some other countries, some other economies who plans to issue green bonds, let's say. that first, the good thing about Indonesia, we've been a regular bond issuance or issuers. So it means that we have the experience to issue, to structure the bonds and everything. However, in terms of green format, this is something new for us. So I think in our experience that it takes three things at least. First is kind of strong commitment, strong leadership. And second, also, it takes or it needs some kind of hard work and as well as consistency, because again, we're talking about long journey here. The last one is good coordination, because as I said, for regular bond issuance, it's only under Ministry of Finance, it's under our control. But when we're talking about this green format, green project, we have to work together with other ministries, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Energy for energy project, things like that. Yeah. So it's not that easy. However, my second advice, let's say, try to pick or have some good partner. Because again, we don't have this expertise, we don't have this experience. So working together, as in our case, working together with UNDP, working together with, let's say, SPC, working together with Cicero also really help us in making this happen, I think. And now, okay, we issued the bond. As I said, it went pretty well. Now we are in the process of the last step, which is writing the report. Again, we don't have experience. We have to, this writing report is not only one-time report, because we have to do that every year. So I think we have to design a system rather than only one-time reporting. So also it takes some time. It takes also resources to do so. And now what we are trying to do right now, try to establish the system. So find the right person, the right unit in different ministries. Some, simple things like that. So, however, this kind of, as I said, a journey. So that's why this year, we only issue one green bond, because we would like to complete one full cycle first before we, let's say, we issue another green bond. And another good thing is that this is kind of byproduct, but this is very important, is that for Indonesia, I think it's typical also in developing countries, first time is always the most difficult one. I mean, so when government is able to issue this green bond for the first time, it also opened the door for other institutions, Indonesian institutions, SOEs, private sectors, private companies, private banks, to also issue these green bonds in green format. So that's what happened, at least so far, two institutions, one SOE under Ministry of Finance, PT SMI, and second one is OCBC, this one commercial bank. They issued green bond in domestic market. In our case, it's for international market. This is for domestic market. And it's a very good response, response from the investors.
Okay, all right. I'm being told that we need to close this discussion, I'm afraid. We've had a very quick, what feels like a very quick half an hour. And our next panelists are chomping at the bit to get on stage. So, ladies and gentlemen, will you thank Anne and Pat Lukey for being for giving us an excellent discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you.